Hello, I'm Michael Wybrow, and in this video I'll talk to you about the assessments for FIT 3178. So the first assessment is a written report or document, and this should be a mobile app design specification. And basically you should think of this as a pitch document. So you have an idea for an app and you're trying to sell the idea and the feasibility to somebody. So the app that you're actually doing the design specification for is an app of your own design, and this will be the app that you're building for your final assessment in this unit. So this works best where you have an idea for the app that you want to build, and this can be something that you would like to exist. However, don't panic. If you don't have an idea for an app, you can pick from a number of application ideas that we have in the assessment brief. So this document is going to describe the idea. It's going to discuss who the audience is. It's going to discuss the feasibility for the app, how you will build it in terms of the technologies that are available. It's going to give a competitor analysis and talk about how your app is different from other similar apps in the App Store. Now, for this, you must get approval from your lab demonstrator, and they are going to check that it meets the requirements in terms of technology. They're also going to be able to advise you on the feasibility. That is, whether you've got something that is too small in scope or too large. And this is a document that you submit via Moodle. It's worth 20% and it's due the Friday of week 4. Obviously by week 4 we've only covered 4 of the 12 weeks worth of material, so the following video this week gives a breakdown of the weekly topics which may be useful in your planning for this assessment. For the first 6 weeks of the unit, the lab exercises cover the fundamentals and the frameworks and approaches that are common to most iOS apps. So because of this, it's really important that you work through these lab exercises and you understand them well. So each of them is assessed. The lab exercise has a guided component that's following a set of instructions, maybe with a few missing pieces that you fill in from your workshop knowledge. And then each of them has an extension exercise where you can take what you've learnt and go a bit further, often having to do some of your own investigation of things like the iOS documentation. So each of these lab exercises will produce a working app that you can have a sort of portfolio of simple iOS apps. And in the following week, so for example, you'll do the lab 1 during your week 1 lab class, and then at the beginning of lab 2, it will be assessed. And the demonstrator will have a look at your work from the previous week. They will ask you some questions and they will check what you've completed, but also assess your understanding of it and give you feedback. These 6 weeks are each worth 4%, so this makes up 24%. Assessment 3 is progress towards your final application. So for the second half of the unit, we switch to mostly working on the app itself and some additional exercises that will contribute to it. So by this point, your first assessment will have been marked and your idea approved, and you'll have been given feedback. So over the 5 weeks from labs 8 to 12, you're going to be demonstrating progress that you've made towards your final app. And each of these will be a little interview with your demonstrator where you'll show them what you've done for your app and show them the code and discuss progress. And this is formative assessment in the sense that the demonstrators will be looking to give you feedback, give you suggestions on what could be improved, how you might fix problems you've encountered. So while you're perfectly welcome to do these demos for each of those 5 weeks. We only assess 4 of the weeks, and this is because we know that a lot of assessments can fall towards the end of semester, so we give you the option to choose a week to skip if you need to. So assessment 4 is the final mobile application. This is due the end of week 14, and it has an interview with your demonstrator the following week. And like we said, this is a non-trivial app. It should be high quality. It should be a full, complete, working iOS application. You will have spent a significant amount of time building it. Note this is due during the final assessment period, or exam period as it used to be known. So just be aware of that when you're planning the semester. The final assessment are the weekly workshop quizzes. So in each workshop there will be a number of individual quiz questions that will be based on the pre-workshop videos that you will have studied before coming to the workshops. We'll also have some small group discussions where I'll set a task or ask a problem and you can discuss it at your tables and then post an individual response via Flux. So this assessment will be based on the best 10 of those 12 weeks for you. So this makes up 10% of your assessment, and this will be conducted in your scheduled workshop. So submission is a little different for the different assessments. So assessment 1, the design specification, and assignment 4, your final app, you'll submit electronically via Moodle in a PDF and a zip file of an Xcode project. For the other assessments, well, for assessments 2, 3, and 4, that is the weekly lab exercises as well as the progress towards and your final app, you will keep all of these in Git, so you'll have records of all of that. For the formally submitted assessments, you'll get feedback given to you within 2 weeks of the submission. For the other assessments that are done as part of workshops or lab classes, you'll get immediate feedback. We'll talk about answers to the quizzes in workshops, and for the interviews or lab work assessment, you'll be given feedback when your demonstrator marks it. For the formal submissions, if they're done late, like is standard for the university, there's a 10% total mark deduction for each day late. So if you need an extension for a piece of work, you need to apply for special consideration. This must be done within 2 working days of the assessment deadline, and you can find information in the university special consideration procedure. Now, having said this, please aim and complete your assessments before the deadline. Getting sick on the submission deadline is not a valid excuse. You should have finished before then. You shouldn't be working on something, in the final couple of hours before the assessment deadline. And computer failure isn't a valid excuse. So we use Git all throughout the unit. You should be using that. You should have backups. And if you were to lose a computer, you should be able to just hop on a lab machine, check out your Git project, and keep on working. So, academic misconduct. We have a zero tolerance towards this. We need to be able to assess your work in the unit. And the university treats this very seriously. If you're discovered to have been involved in plagiarism or collusion, you're very likely just to get a mark of 0, either for the assessment or for the unit. Now, we recognize that there may be a need for you to use third-party libraries, and we don't discourage that, but you should talk to your demonstrator about it. And if you are using third-party libraries, these libraries should be things that do They should be libraries that do things that we haven't taught in the unit. You shouldn't be using a third-party library to do something that the iOS frameworks can just do themselves. And if you are using third-party libraries, you need to be correctly attributing them and referencing them in your code. So that means we have an about screen, we acknowledge that you're using those libraries. Similarly, if you make use of any online answers or tutorials like Stack Overflow, you can do that by putting comments in your code and just giving the URL where you found an answer to something that fixed a problem. Now, a caveat here, we would strongly suggest that you use the unit materials as your primary source of research or starting point for any of this kind of reading or investigation. And that's because we work hard to make sure the unit teaches best practices and is up to date. Many of the resources you'll find online will be out of date. They'll teach old or worse ways of doing things. I've many times seen students that have worked through an online tutorial, and the tutorial is a couple of years old and it makes something much harder than it would have been with the approaches we teach. So if there's something you don't know how to do and it's not taught in the unit and you'd like to know how, feel free to ask us on the Ed forums and we can provide either links to material that can help you or make suggestions on how you should approach the problem. A word on generative AI. Some of you might be familiar with systems like ChatGPT that has been in the news a lot recently. This is basically deep language models that can answer questions for you. They can be quite impressive when you first look at them, but they don't always give good advice or answers. So first off, it typically won't give you suggestions that match what we've taught. And because of this, they usually or often won't be the easiest way to do something. And they may not be best practice, as in they may not be up to date, especially given something like ChatGPT is only trained up to 2001. There have been changes to iOS and Swift in 2022 that we've updated the unit for, so be aware of that. The other really big issue with generative AI in general, irrespective of whether you're using it for this unit, is it can't tell you where it sourced its information. So if it gives you some recommendation and you ask it, why did it make that suggestion? It can't tell you. And that's problematic because if you don't know that you can trust it, then what happens is you can't verify that it's giving you correct advice. So what you'll notice in our assessments for this unit is we don't prohibit it, and really that's my belief that these are useful AI tools, but you have to be very wary of them. So what we say is that you can use generative AI in order to conduct background research. However, we strongly discourage it. I think you'd be better off Googling for most answers and or just asking us in the Ed forums and getting advice that way. But if you do use generative AI at all, you must appropriately acknowledge it. And if you look in the assessments, they say that that means including giving the prompts that you've used to ask it questions. Okay, thanks for watching.